Good evening, everybody.
Using.
Hi. So, I'm glad that you're able to join us. I know that at least one person who usually does isn't able to, because of um, obligations they have with the Shiva home. I know that a Shiva minion has just concluded. I know it's been a day of heavy hearts, a couple days for heavy hearts for the community, and so I want to recognize that at the top and simply say that I hope that learning words of Torah will help to uh, lighten them just in the smallest way, hopefully in a very appropriate way. So I wanted to kind of acknowledge that from the start. Um, we remain on course to be meeting pretty much every other weekend. I actually went through the calendar. Um, unless I'm mistaken, which is always possible, unless I'm mistaken, I think we're pretty much every other Monday through the end of June. June is, I think the last one will be June 29th. That's the last Monday in June. And then I go to Camp Ramah. So in July we will be off, but I wanted to at least let you know what my sense the upcoming schedule will be, and we'll try to continue to make some headway. Um, we are going to Psalm 32. That is where we're starting, and I imagine we'll be able to get through the entirety of it. Any questions or comments that anyone wants to make before we start? Okay, no worries. Well, let me then let's get Safaria up, and we will go from there. Okay. A little bigger. Okay. Um, this is an interesting start. First of all, please feel free to um remind me if I'm mistaken here, but I'm pretty sure we haven't had a maskil yet. What you find in verse one, at the superscription at the beginning. We haven't had maskil mentioned yet. The This is one of those times where the Jewish Publication Society is, of course, very helpful in saying, well, okay, we don't really know what this is. Um, Alter um, gives us more information. And by the way, I'm not trying to criticize the Jewish Publication Society translation. I mean, I mean, they just, uh, I mean, I think part of it is they're trying to encourage further study, and I don't think that's, a bad thing at all. So, I don't need JPS to necessarily spell out every single thing, at once. Um, but Alter does have a little bit more information. He writes that regarding a maskil, he says this is clearly a category of song, but its precise nature remains unknown. From the words use in the prophet Amos chapter 5 verse 13, it would appear to be a joyous song, though not all the occurrences in psalms substantiate that connotation. In this particular psalm, there may also be a punning reference to a homonym that means discerning person or giver of instruction. And and let's see, what else does he say? He's got a lot to say about this, actually. Maybe a little too much. No, it's okay. Uh, Hermann Gunkel, if I'm saying that right, noted that this psalm contains distinct wisdom elements, especially from verse 8 onward. As to genre, okay, all right, so we'll talk about that in a moment. So, if you've heard of the idea of the Haskalah, the Haskalah is the essentially it's the Jewish version of the Enlightenment. When we talk about the Enlightenment in Europe and let's say 17th, 18th century, the philosophers that began to, bring Europe out of the so-called Dark Ages and into a more modern outlook and a more, some of those ideas that became some of the seedlings for the founding of democracy. The Haskalah within Judaism was which it was a movement to add reason to some of the typical Jewish philosophies. Um, and so when you have this word, a maskil, maybe Alter is suggesting maybe the maskil is kind of like a pun on the word that gives us Haskalah. In other words, this is not just a song, but it's an instruction. The instruction is that of wisdom literature. Now, it probably bears repeating what wisdom literature actually is. Wisdom literature, at least biblically, refers to several books of the Bible, namely, most prominently at least, the books of Ecclesiastes, Job, and Proverbs. Those are considered to be wisdom books, which are very much based on practical advice, very much relying on philosophy and reason, as opposed to, and it does struggle with notions of faith, right? There is this idea of struggling with faith, at least from time to time. It doesn't necessarily say that we shouldn't have faith, but at least there is a struggle involved. So, um, so what we are going to get, according to Alter, at least in the second half of this psalm, is something wisdomy, if you will. It's something a little more of the something dedicated a little more to reason and a little less, for lack of a better term, blind faith. We'll see if that winds up checking out, but that's kind of the implication in here. Questions or thoughts about Muskeel?
Hmm. Only that you really like puns.
I do. I do. Yeah. And I mean, listen, it's there are those look, I'm not necessarily in the camp of saying that the pun is the highest form of wit. There are many who think that it's the opposite, that the pun is the lowest form of humor. I think honestly it depends on the pun. Some puns are incredibly clever. Other puns are just uh, nauseating. I mean, it really is the case. Um, uh,
Sometimes
again,
you make us really think about it. Some of yours are really subtle.
thanks. I mean, yeah, I mean, there was one, I think in college, I remember somebody, like one of my friends who also likes to pun, he was saying something about how uh how like like this person was talking about how like that they had pain in their wrists and in their hands, and that it was especially present while driving. And um and so the response was, well, hopefully you don't have to give other people rides, because then you may be a victim of carpool tunnel syndrome. Which, I mean, I mean, now that's clever. That's clever. You might, whether or not you like it, that is like that's impressive to be able to do that. Um, so like that's one where I'm like, okay, you know what, points for you. I mean, in whatever game we're playing, right? Okay. So, all right, so here we are. Um, Richard, you want to start us off doing like one, two, three in English?
Sure. Happy is the one whose transgression is forgiven, whose sin is covered over. Happy the person whom God does not hold guilty, and in whose spirit there is no deceit. As long as I said nothing, my limbs wasted away from my anguished roaring all day long.
All right. Um, Now, a couple things. I think there are some curiosities here right off the bat. Um, Verse one, this idea of whose sin is covered over. It's an interesting way of looking at it, and I'm not trying to say that it's not a good translation. Um, um, it's uh, the translation offered by Alter in this case, Kasui Chata'a, is absolved of offense. Covered over makes it. I mean, I bristle a little bit at the word choice. I mean, Kasui is, like that does indicate like something being covered, but like I don't know, maybe I'm just too caught up in the English, idea of like a cover up, right? So thinking of like somebody whose sin is covered up, it's like somebody who got away with something, as opposed to somebody absolved of offense, which doesn't necessarily indicate any funny business. So I think that part is a little unclear, and maybe it will clarify itself as we go along. But eh, it's a little, it's kind of curious to me that they would say, covered over, like, did this person do it or did this person get away with it? I don't think it's necessarily clear. But in verse three, I mean, this one I find very interesting. As long as I said nothing, my limbs wasted away from my anguish roaring all day long. Now, the Alter translation is a bit different. He writes, when I was silent, my limbs were worn out when I roared all day long. All right, so what does he have to say about this? Um, he notes that this is really weird. This is, or maybe not weird, but very puzzling how to understand this. He writes, attempts to resolve the contradiction between silence and roaring here have been unavailing. The text looks suspect, especially because the second half of the verse is abbreviated. One may guess that a phrase has been dropped out that would have formed a complementary parallelism, such as, when I roared all day long, my body was wasted. Um, Now, so in other words, what we're trying to figure out here, at least what these scholars are trying to figure out, maybe we have other questions, but what the scholars are trying to figure out is, okay, is this person actually, is he wasting away from his silence, or is he wasting away from all the yelling he's been doing that has then led him to silence and withering away?
Would you read Alter again,
Sure.
please?
Yeah, no problem. Says, when I was silent, my limbs were worn out, dash, when I roared all day long.
This
So
sort of
what,
works in, yeah, this sort of works a bit better. How would you translate the Hebrew?
you know, uh, uh, yeah, I mean, it's honestly like, I think that either of these translations, the one I read to you from Alter and then the one you see in front of you, I think they're both perfectly reasonable. Ki hecharashti, for when I was silent, balu atzamai, my, bones were, kind of like fraying, I guess. B'shagati kol hayom, when yeah, sha'ag, I mean, like, it's like roaring. Yeah. So, I mean, like, or, or yelling. So I do like Alter's theory that this is actually, um, I do like this theory that there's like, this feels like a fragment. It feels like there's a couple words missing that would have make more sense. In other words, um, like, as long as I said nothing, my limbs wasted away. When I roared all day long, I was also, you know, physically diminished or something like, I mean, something like that. I mean, obviously, I don't know what those other words would be for sure, certainly. So I mean, it is kind of curious, but but even if we were to assume that this was made to be a complete thought, then I wonder if we can say to ourselves that it's, when I said nothing, it was because my limbs were wasting away from all my roaring. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what comes to my mind is from sitting in meetings, um, is that if you sit in a meeting and you really have a great disagreement with what's going on and you say nothing,
Yeah.
that has one effect on you emotionally. But if you constantly roar at that meeting about the things that you disagree with, that also has a negative effect on you and the people around you.
Yeah.
Somehow that's what comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially over Zoom. Um uh,
Where you, where you can't hit back.
yeah, yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's uh, I was on a Zoom meeting. This was not for the synagogue. But I was on a Zoom meeting a few years ago where there was one person who took it upon himself to make a certain point, and I began to time it, like how long he was going. He talked for 9 minutes straight. And when he finally finished, um, and this meeting had already been going on for an hour and a half. I mean, it was people were done with this meeting. And I was I was so tempted to it would not have been nice, and I'm glad I didn't do it. But I was so tempted to say after this person was done, "Hey, I didn't catch all that. Could you repeat that?"
Was he a rabbi?
He was not actually.
Wasn't paid to talk then.
No. Yeah, yeah. I mean, listen, honestly, look, if I were to go on for 9 minutes straight, I think you'd have every right to go, okay, this is, like, sum up, please, like something, in a meeting setting at the very least. I think a sermon is a different story, but I mean, at a meeting, yeah, like, okay, enough. Because you have to have input. It's, uh, yeah, I mean, and part of the challenge when we have meetings, of any organization, is to create a scenario where people feel that they have buy-in, that their voice can be heard, but also that those people who have the need to be heard can leave room for other people to be a part of the conversation. You know what I'm saying? It's it's the awareness of the need to be included without uh completely shutting out other people. Um, so yeah, I mean, there are times where, I mean, suffice it to say, and I think maybe a something we can draw from this is the idea that um, when we are that there are different forms of exhaustion. There's exhaustion from holding things in. there's exhaustion from letting it out. Does that sound fair? So, okay. Well, good. Let's why don't we
That's more succinctly put than what I was trying to say.
Oh no, it's all good. It's all good.
No, your language is better.
Mary Linda, are you able to do some reading for us?
Yes, yeah, no injections today.
All right, great. 4 and 5, if you would.
For night, for night and day, your hand lay heavy on me. My vigor waned as in the summer drought, Selah. Then I acknowledged my sin to you. I did not cover up my guilt. I resolved I will confess my transgressions to God, and you forgave the guilt of my sin. Selah.
Selah. Okay. Um, we've had Selah before, haven't we? We've talked about Selah. I think we might have. Selah is, I mean, Selah means different things. One, I mean, there are times where Selah refers to, like rock or, I mean, and presumably a very large rock, think the Rock of Gibraltar big, right? Um, but, in this case, Selah, it's sort of like, it's kind of meant to be an exclamation mark. Like it's almost like you're saying, yeah, or yeehaw, something along those lines. So yeah, that's what I think this is about. So, um, uh, yeah, I mean, so let's see what we have on here. So, yeah, I mean, Alter doesn't have much on these couple of verses. Uh, the handling heavy, um, and uh, so again, we have this weariness that was alluded to in verse 3, but then there is this catharsis in verse 5, right? In other words, like, yeah, I admitted it, and God, credit where credit is due, you forgave me. um Sorry, yes.
That's kind of an odd turn of phrase. It seems to me you forgave the guilt of my sin
Hmm.
rather than you forgave my sin or my guilt, but the guilt of my sin.
Yeah, so Vyatana Sata Avon Chatati. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm tempted. Alter doesn't have a comment on this. I'm tempted to say that Avon Chatati is just one of those, like, it's two synonyms or it's like, it's kind of like an emphasis on it when you say, like, okay, there's and again, I just love bringing in, musical, like modern music to these things. Like there's a song, this is a song that my kids like called Cake by the Ocean. I don't think it's really the appropriate song for here, but there's this part in the refrain where it's like, come on, let's go crazy, crazy, right? So saying let's go crazy and saying let's go crazy, crazy, well, what sounds like more crazy when you double it, right? Avon and chata both mean sin. Like, so it's almost like you forgave my sinful sin. You forget my sinny sin. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be silly, but like, what I'm saying? Like it's like it's just adding a layer of emphasis to it. So the guilt of my sin, I would say, like, guilt is kind of like, so and by contrast, Alter writes, for you forgave my offending crime. Again, that's kind of the same thing, right? And, an offense and a crime, they're, pretty similar ideas, right? So I think it's just to say that, like, whatever it was pretty bad. Um, and uh, so it's yeah, so I mean, yeah, I agree. It is a curiosity. Um, but this is a feature of biblical poetry, which I may have talked about before, this idea that um, by doubling certain words or by having synonyms right next to each other, it's just meant to really emphasize the importance of it, which, you know, lest I forget, leads me to say that there are really not a lot of Psalms in which the person who the narrator of the psalm, who oftentimes feels aggrieved, threatened, you know, something along those lines, rarely is there much of an acknowledgement that they may have done something that to have led him or her into this situation. Usually it's my enemies. They're coming to get me. They're, what have I done but, worship you, and yet my enemies are out to get me. That's a much more common refrain than a statement of, yeah, I had something coming to me.
But the sin stays. The guilt, God has removed the guilt so you can go on with your life.
Right.
So I go into confession, I guess. But the sin, you still did what you did.
Yeah. 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 So I mean, there is so there is obviously a part of it that says it's like, like, just for the record, I was forgiven, and thanks to God for the for the assist there, right? But yeah. Um, okay. So there's gonna be something again. This is a very unconventional psalm in a lot of ways, and I really like it when things kind of feel a little different. Um, I want to do, if it's okay with you, I want to read verse 6. I want to do this one, if only because there is a major contrast, or I think an important contrast at least, between the way that JPS looks at this and what Alter does. It says, "Therefore let all the faithful pray to you upon discovering their sin, that the rushing mighty waters not overtake them." Okay. Now, the their sin, right? The idea of their sin is implied, right? This is what this is telling us, right? That like, so in other words, if you're being literal about it, it's like, therefore let all the faithful pray to you upon discovering. All right, what's being discovered exactly? Well, the assumption is that because of what it's next to, it's talking about their sin. And that and other translations say, um, therefore let all the faithful pray to you in a time when you may be found. So here's how Alter does it instead. He translates this as follows. For this, and by the way, he puts this verse in brackets. In other words, he looks at this verse, that the entire verse is a parenthetical comment. And the way he translates it is, for this, every faithful man prays to you in time of need, only that the rush of mighty waters should not reach him. His comment says, it would be misleading to set this verse as poetry because it does not scan and has no true parallelism. one suspects a sentence from another text was introduced through scribal inadvertence. The brackets indicate that this verse is not part of the poem. Alter is claiming that this verse was like a complete goof. Like it was a sorry, it was a scribal goof.
So all of verse 6 is from someplace else.
Yeah, that's what he seemed to think. And so but so by contrast, JPS is trying to, and by the way, I don't blame JPS for doing this. I mean, I think it's a reasonable way of looking at it. To say that, all right, well, I think, and keep in mind, the JPS translation and the Alter translation, they do fulfill different purposes. And I think this may be just an important thing, overall thing for us to keep in mind. The Jewish Publication Society translation is just that. It's a translation, meaning only on occasion, like with these little footnotes, do you have much of an explanation as to why they translated the way they did, or what this is all, or what the larger context is. Alter, Robert Alter, over the course of his life, has published his own translation to the Tanakh, to the Hebrew Bible, and a full swath of commentaries about it. So he has the luxury of, now a luxury that he obviously worked very hard to achieve. So I'm not trying to, take anything away from him. He has the luxury of being able to, make a translation and then give us all the goods on why he chose what he chose, the words he chose. He gets to justify it. It would be, to me at least, very interesting to have been like a fly in the wall in the room, if it was one room, where the JPS scholars put together their translations. Right? I don't know the people that they consulted, honestly. They definitely consulted, top scholars. I don't doubt that for a moment. But, like what led, but it may be interesting, like when we try to, do the kinds of things that we do in this class, when we are really, going word by word, verse by verse. There are times when it'd be really nice to know. It's like, okay, like what was the argument back and forth? What were people, did everybody agree with this translation? Because there have been some translations here from JPS that I know that some of us have gone, oh, I don't know if that makes sense, right? So it would be so, but for whatever reason, and I'm sure there may be very good reasons, JPS hasn't come out with like a full commentary on their translations. They've never done that. So I think that's just an important thing for us to keep in mind in terms of why things are the way they are there. Questions on all that. Okay. All right. Linda, could you do let's see, 7, 8, 9? And I know that all of 9 isn't on the screen, but I'll scroll that if you don't, if you'd be so kind.
You are my shelter. You preserve me from distress. You surround me with the joyous shouts of deliverance. Selah. Let me enlighten you and show you which way to go. Let me offer counsel. My eye is on you. Be not like a senseless horse or mule whose movement must be curbed by bit and bridle. Far be it from you.
Okay, this took a turn, did it not? Right? Okay, I mean, now, uh, uh, verse 7 seems, I think, um, straightforward enough, although, um, um, uh, it's like joyous shouts of deliverance. Alter says that he translates it as glad songs of deliverance. Um, so he just finds this little bit awkward, but the real turn happens in verse 8. Okay. This is, let me enlighten you and show you which way to go. This is, by the way, like it's like ripped from the pages of the book of Proverbs, right? If you look at the book of Proverbs, there is which by the way, maybe one day we'll do a Proverbs class because it's really it's interesting and it really is kind of its own thing in a lot of ways. Um, but this is very much, a Proverbs type statement where it's like, it's like, listen, my son, to the guidance that I provide you now. There's a lot of that. And so Alter is suggesting that this is, an entirely new part of the poem, or maybe even a completely different poem. And, I mean, my eye is on you. Alter does instead, let me counsel you with my own sight. So in other words, like, um, and you can imagine an elder potentially saying, I have seen things. Oh, the things I have seen, right? And like, um, I'm there's a if you've ever have you ever seen the movie Scent of a Woman?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really, I mean, I think a very good movie, and there
One,
is
one of my favorites, that dance scene.
yeah, great, great, great. I mean, I really enjoy it as well, and and Al Pacino playing this, like he's taking on this, teenage boy as like his, protege. And then, in the big climactic speech he gives to defend the honor of this boy in front of his school, he's like, he at one point because I mean, the character, Al Pacino's character is blind. And he says, um, he's like, he goes at one point, like, I've been around, I have seen things. I wasn't always blind, and I did see things, right? I mean, like he's saying like, don't just because of my current, disability that I don't understand life, because not only have I truly lived life, but I have also, but there were things that I actually did see with my own eyes before the blindness came. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, it's just, this idea of, uh, I mean, like somebody who's, they've been around, they've lived a life, um, and they have ideas to offer. Um, okay. And now we're talking about horses. Okay, let's try to figure this out. All right. Here's how Alter translates verse 9. Be not like a horse, like a mule without sense. Okay, pretty similar to that start. Then it goes, the bit and the reins his adornment, to keep him from drawing near you. Alter then comments, understandably, this is another cryptic moment in the text, you think? Okay. The Masoretic text, meaning the official text that we use for the Tanakh, breaks the line after reins, which makes no clear sense. Perhaps the idea is that the bit and reins, which may seem to be an ornament, are actually put on the uncomprehending beast simply in order to guide him away from running into people. Meaning, I mean, I'm tempted at first blush to understand verse 9 as essentially saying, think for yourself, right? Don't be like the mule or the horse that has to be led everywhere. Use your own discernment.
Yet the verse before he's saying, let me enlighten you and I will show you which way to go.
Right, right. So it is a bit contradictory, no? Right, contradictory. Um, and but I do think contradictory, but also I think a contradiction that a lot of people have when they offer advice. I think a lot sometimes when people offer advice, they're like, you know, it's like, okay, what piece of advice is given more than anything else? I would guess that the most common bit of advice that a person receives is be yourself. And let's be fair. To be fair, a lot of times that's really good advice. Have I offered advice like that at different times? Yeah, sure. It oftentimes is good advice. But underneath that implication sometimes is it's sort of like be yourself, be like me. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Um, like don't listen to people who, stand in your way. Listen to people like me who are on your side. You know what I'm saying? Like it's I think it's rare is the person, I think, that can simultaneously raise free thinkers or encourage free thinking and also put up with what happens when those people think freely when
That's the
it
challenge. Yeah.
when it runs counter to your ideas, right? I mean, um uh, it's tough, and it is tough, right? Because because look, you give people truth serum, and it's like, yeah, oh yeah, I wanted my kids to be free thinkers. I just didn't think that they'd be free, thinking, that much, like completely differently than, where I was, right? Um, so it's I find it, I mean, look, this is you know, a challenge I have had at times. My son, my oldest, is he's turned away from a lot of from almost any Jewish practice. He is he is respectful of what I do in my home when he's there. I mean, he's absolutely respectful. So I mean, I can't ask for more than that. Will it you know, do I want him to live his own life? Of course I do. Is it a little tough sometimes when it's so different than what I raised him with? Yeah, I'll admit sometimes it's like, couldn't you do a little bit? Couldn't you do kind of like that? But you have to, but that, and I think that's part of the challenge when we offer advice. It's like, okay, be willing to offer advice and stick with it, even if it, even if they wind up going against what you picture.
But that's this year or this part of his life. And he may come back if you don't force it on him at this point.
100%. And yeah, and I really do look, I really do want, I mean, listen, I really do want him to be who he is. And and he did say, I mean, and look, he did say to me before Purim, he's like, "Are you sending me Mishloach Manot?" And I'm like,
You
"I
do still love me. You do still love me, don't you?
yeah, no." And and I said, I'm like, "You want Mishloach Manot? Of course I'll send you Mishloach Manot." Um, then he began to be saying, "Why didn't you send me this instead of that?" I'm like, "Okay, look, I sent you a care package. Relax, but it's okay." Um, no, but I mean, like, but look, obviously, I was glad that that he want that. It's like and you could and I could be cynical and say, "Oh, well, he just wanted the free food," but something, food is part of what being Jewish is. It is part of it. So
He wanted it from you.
that too, that too. So no, so I mean, no, it's absolute. So and so it's okay. So I think again, I think it is as we indicated, this is a human reaction. A very human thing to do, to offer advice and and have to grapple with the impact of said advice.
Another thing that bothers me about verse 9 is that horses are senseless. They will work themselves to death. Mules won't. They will stop before
Mm,
they hurt themselves. And I think this assumes both animals are alike. It has nothing to do with what the verse is trying to do, but that is a conflict for me.
sure. Okay. So maybe just, yeah, maybe a not really understanding animals, or at least what these animals do. Um,
Yes.
so okay. There are two more verses in this. Alter does not have any comments on this, but I can certainly, take a look at that. Um, uh, uh, you know, Will, I'm happy to have you read. I know you generally say no thanks, but I'm happy for you to do it if you want.
No thanks.
Not a problem. Not a problem. I don't want to. I don't want you to think that I mean, I want to include you in whatever way you can. So it's all good. Um, uh, Anybody want to read again?
I can read again
Go for it.
since,
All right.
since I don't always get to read.
Go for it. Bavakasha, please do.
Uh, and I'm enjoying the discussion.
Mm.
Many are the torments of the wicked, but those who trust in God shall be surrounded with favor. Rejoice in God and exult, O you righteous. Shout for joy, all the upright.
Yeah. I think it kind of winds up in a relatively conventional um manner, which is not to take anything away from it. I mean, like, in terms, I mean, it doesn't make it, problematic. It's just, yeah. Um it kind of I mean, uh, if you are to but it also maintains, certainly in verse 10, um this does maintain sort of that wisdom tradition, that proverbs sensibility, right? um which is this contrast between those who live life the right way and those who don't, right? If you choose the path of the wicked, um you're asking for trouble. And if you're trusting in God and going on that right path, then things will be good, right? it it's one of the reasons why, I mean, I know it's probably, feels like ages ago that we did the first psalm, but Psalm 1 really does set the tone, in which it says, like, happy are the ones who follow God, who follow the commandments, um, and the opposites. Unfortunate are those who stray. Um, and so we have this sort of echo of this once again. There are times where those ideas appear at the end of a psalm where it feels like it's just kind of thrown in. But if we look at it, with 9, 10, and 10 and 11 sort of like as a final unit, right? Like we said, don't be like the senseless horse or mule. Again, problematic how we're dealing with the animals. You know, uh, you know, you know, think for yourself and make the right choice, right? Think for yourself and be sensible about it. And the implication being the sensible path will lead you to trusting in God. Maybe that's circular logic, but hey, this is a religious text. What did you expect, right? um, it's but I guess my final comment on this, at least the last thing that comes to my mind at this moment, is that I want to go and just make another observation about the wisdom books. That the wisdom books are, um, you know, they at many times, um, they really kind of challenge some of the notions that we have in our tradition. And that challenge is sometimes resolved. In other words, I struggled with this challenge, but in the end, I, arrived at this, a place that I feel comfortable with. And other times it's kind of unsettled. I mean, honestly, if you look at the book of Job, which is definitely part of the wisdom tradition, um, one of the great, I guess, misconceptions or statements that just feels kind of out of place when we think of Job. We talk about the patience of Job. On one level, yes, Job declines to curse God. But for someone who doesn't curse God, Job spends an awfully long time whining, right? He's complaining a lot. He doesn't curse God, but there's a lot of I don't know what this is. I don't know why is this happening? I don't get it. Not that I blame him. I mean, what happens to him at the beginning of the story is horrendous. Um, and then God famously shows up into the conversation in a whirlwind and, puts on this sort of impressive visual show and essentially says, "Where were you when I created the world?" And then pretty much disappears after that. Like, I mean, God says more than just that one sentence, but God really, like, kind of goes into this whole thing of like, it's like, you guys don't get it. You guys don't understand me. You don't get it. Peace out, essentially, is what happens. So all of these philosophical questions that are being raised go unanswered. But then God gives everything back to Job, gives him wealth back, restores his health. He has more children. He lives to a ripe old age, happy and contented. It's one of those things where, I mean, it's absolutely flummoxing on some levels to read that and to And are we what are we trying to say? Is the lesson from it essentially don't question God? Is the lesson feel free to question, just don't expect any real answers? Or is it that you can question, but as long as you're not cursing God, God will take care of you? Not exactly clear. And that's part of what is so challenging about the text. But I think the fact that it ends with this neat and tidy ending of sorts, at least Job winds up, in a decent place. It seems to, it feels like the text is like, okay, but all right, so, but Job turns out okay. Don't worry, Job's all right. It's a little too tidy at the end. And by the way, so is the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes says all these incredibly cynical things. They do say, it does say some positive things. And right at the end, it's like, the sum of the matter is follow God and God's commandments. I mean, it is like the most obvious example of somebody just tacked this on because we can't have the book end this way. um, it is, but it's nice, I think, when we find these difficult questions creep into the text of even the most faith affirming passages. Because if we never questioned at all, well, what's the point of free will?
Richard, we need to take that back to our
I
Shabbos
was
morning study.
just thinking that from Will's class.
Oh yeah, okay. So
Back to Will's class.
we talked about that, about free will.
But yeah, we spent one paragraph. I actually bled into the next week too, talking about free will.
Mhm.
Does it exist? Does it not exist? God knows. How can we have free will if God knows? And as usual, our discussions are quite lively.
Well, you can take back that, wherever you go with where we go with the topic of free will, we find that our will is priceless. So I'm glad he's been giving you a chance to teach. Or giving you a chance to learn and to discuss. All right. Well,
Yeah, Yashikosh, very nice.
Brooke, yeah.
Oh,
So let's go to so in 2 weeks, let's see. Will be Psalm 33, which will probably take us a couple sessions. It's twice the length of this one. So, I mean, look, you never know. You never know where our discussions go, but I think we'll let's assume that. And everyone be well. I have lunch and learn this Wednesday, 11:30, and we'll do this class again in 2 weeks. We'll have Judaism 101 this coming Sunday, and the beat goes on. All right, take care, everybody. Have